Good day, good day. How are you? How are you? Hi, my name is Roxanne. This program is about helping children help themselves, body, mind, and spirit. Today we will have a bit of a conversation about really the responsibility we have to teach our children to be responsible for their own happiness, their own actions, for what they create, and to help them to remain in their power by always knowing that they have their own inner guidance, and for them to learn to treasure it forever. It's a pleasure to introduce to you today Joan Borysenko, a very well-established and accomplished not only researcher in cell biology, one of the former co-directors of the Mind-Body Clinic at the Deaconess Hospital in a part of the behavioral medicine department at Harvard Medical School. But Joan has also written many books, one of which she is well known for, Minding the Body, Mending the Mind, and much of the research in the mind-body area has been cultivated by her and her colleagues, and much of my work is influenced by that, as well as her more recent work, which leads her to spiritual life. Her new book, entitled The Golden Compass, Living a Spiritually Guided Life, is something that I would like her to speak about today, as well as the mind-body connection and how we can help children really begin to understand and integrate not only the psychological tasks at hand as they grow through childhood into adulthood, but more importantly, how to truly live a spiritually guided life. Hi, Joan.
Hi, Roxanne. What a pleasure to be on your show, and what an important show it is.
Well, that's why I've asked you to help to deliver some of the most important information that I think you have right now been working on, which is this golden compass, really talking about how all of us have to calibrate an inner moral compass, and moral development of a child is really quite challenging for many of the folks who come to me these days. And I am very intrigued by the title of your book and how you got involved in it, and perhaps it might be a good thing to back up a little bit and just lay the groundwork for those listeners who may not be aware of the basic mind-body connection, that of which I know many years ago when we worked together and I assisted you, there were some very solid principles upon which your work is built and has now moved into spirituality. But it is probably worth just taking something from that first book called Minding the Body, Mending the Mind, and giving maybe just a thumbnail sketch.
Well, sure, absolutely. Yeah. And, the thing is this: we don't stop being children and then start being adults. What we learn in childhood about who we are, what our strengths are, what our challenges are, our sense of self accompanies us through life, and for better or for worse. And when I was running a mind-body clinic, I was aware both of that psychological perspective, Roxanne, and also I am a cell biologist by training with a great interest in immunology. And I became fascinated in the way that our psychological beliefs and our past history actually change our physiology throughout our life, and that's what the mind-body connection is about. So, for example, whether you are anxious or happy, depressed, creative, all these things create differences in your brain chemistry. And the circuitry in your brain doesn't end up just in your brain, but you release hormones from the brain, which go to every cell in your body and affect its function. So we know very literally now, for example, that a sense of high self-esteem, an ability to trust in life, to feel like you're part of some larger co-creative process, the idea, the sense that you're loved, all of this affects the function of your body as well as your ability to be successful in this life. And it affects your ability to develop things like emotional intelligence.
Right, exactly.
So that's the mind-body connection. And it became very clear a number of years ago that about, depends on whose estimates you look at, but somewhere between 70 and 90% of visits to a doctor's office, like a general practitioner, family practice office, are due to stress-related illnesses. And we have a wonderful system of modern medicine, and thank God we don't need it for a lot of things. What we need is to learn to manage our stress. And a lot of our stress comes through how we were taught as children, whether, for example, the difficulties of life were considered punishments because we were bad, or some deity was looking at us with displeasure. Or on the other hand, when we're taught, well, change is just part of life, that you have to be able to look at adversity as a signal to grow, as a signal to become more resilient. And sometimes people just don't have enough of a sense of having been loved or held as children to have that resilience. And that
I think you're right. That's the key, is that what were they taught as children? That is what's carried over as they move into their adult life, and they anchor their beliefs and their assumptions in their attitudes. And I know we spoke quite a bit about attitudes at the Mind-Body Clinic, and in those meditation classes that you taught, people began to watch their thoughts in the meditative process. And I wanted to just put in the very, I would say, simple version of dis-ease versus ease, or the stress response versus the relaxation response, and how the body actually has a powerful shift when we are in that fight or flight response. What happens, and then when we are in the relaxation response, what happens?
Oh, absolutely. So, I think we all know that there are people, and maybe some of your listeners are amongst those people, who something like really small happens. You don't get, for example, the check in the mail that you were expecting, or some report that was due for work doesn't go well. And instead of just saying, well, I'll get the check tomorrow and I'll deal with the report, I'll inquire into it and figure out what it is that people needed, and I'll do better next time. There are people who just go off the deep end. It's like the world has come to an end. And they become literally hysterical over these things, overstressed, hyper-reactive, and they initiate what's been called a fight or flight response, which is great if you're facing a real threat, like a mugger chasing you down the street. But you don't need that. In fact, it gets in the way when you're trying to learn to cope adaptively with a normal situation of life. So the fact is, our nervous systems get hardwired in the beginning. Maybe even at some of it's genetic, but the way a mother takes care of herself during her pregnancy, what she experiences actually can affect the developing nervous system of the fetus. And then, of course, what it's like in the child's house as they grow up, what's modeled by their parents, whether there's love, whether there's abuse. All of this sets up your nervous system in terms of how it reacts to stress. So if you tend to go into a fight or flight response for no good reason, and as I said, there are many good reasons to go into it, which is why you have it.
Right.
But if you go into it for a not so good reason, then likely you'll end up to be some of the 70 to 90% of those visits to your family doctor due to stress. Because what happens is, not only are you likely to feel anxiety, which is very unpleasant, or fear, which is even more unpleasant, a stronger kind of anxiety, but this can diminish the activity of your immune system so that you're more likely to pick up infectious diseases, colds, flus, even tooth decay has been related to stress. that's actually caused by a bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
You're more likely to develop things like high blood pressure or irregular heartbeats, muscle tension disorders, stomach aches, you name it. So many things are either caused by or made worse by stress. Even other illnesses, people, for example, with multiple sclerosis will often report that stress makes their condition worse. So all of that is fight or flight related. When I was working at Harvard, I was working with a cardiologist who you know quite well, Roxanne, Dr. Herbert Benson. And I think many of your listeners are also familiar with his work because in addition to being a heart specialist, he's the person who first looked at meditation and said, what meditation does is it elicits this response within the body called the relaxation response. It takes you out of the hyper-alert mode. It calms down the activating branch of the sympathetic nervous system.
Right, specifically the blood pressure, heart rate, respiration, breathing.
That's right.
Right.
All that.
So even though people on the East Coast may not believe it yet, I know people on the West Coast are far more open to meditation as a viable avenue for decompression. But the impact of stress on the physiology, as you mentioned, is so severe that if we don't learn ways to truly turn the volume down on the autonomic nervous system, we will wear the system out. And the simple way of restoration is by way of meditation. And go ahead and complete that thought.
Meditation, Roxanne, as you know very well from your own work, is just one way to turn the volume down and elicit this built-in relaxation response. There are lots of things that trigger it. Music can do that. That's why worldwide listening to music is ranked the number one stress reduction tool. Then going out in nature. It's amazing how the thoughts that are driving you crazy just leave your mind. And suddenly you feel the earth underneath your feet and the warmth of the sun and the breeze, and there you are. You're present to the moment instead of to the movies of your mind.
Then, beautiful.
Thank you.
I love that.
Then there's movement. There's a lot of people who just aren't drawn to sitting with their eyes closed to meditate or find that it's just not right for their personality. And that's why I think, for example, training in the martial arts, training in yoga, all of these turn down the volume of your mind by getting your focus off your thoughts and into your breath and into your body.
Right.
And they also, all of these are techniques that allow you to learn how to focus your mind. And for example, this is what's left out, I think, in school curriculum is kids learning simply how to focus and to be present in the moment. Because there are so many demands of daily life, not only for adults, but also kids. You think of the average adult who's like a parent of children.
Right, I know, and it seems so simple, and yet it's so far afield from their repertoire of what they can access because parents aren't necessarily versed in doing it for themselves. That's where I find a lot of the way I address a child's anxiety or a problem in that way is to ask the parents to invite the parents actually to do some of these very basic mindfulness or focusing techniques. And I know Native Americans are well known for teaching the young children how to get in touch with nature, their intuition, if you will, by asking them to go out, into the woods and to stay there, to sit with a tree and to be even blindfolded with that tree until the elders come back for them. And during that time, they ask these young children to just touch the tree, hug it, lean against it, stand by it, learn something from it. And then we will come to get you, and you will tell us what the tree said to you. this kind of focusing is sort of a complement of what you were mentioning, nature, going to nature, and also having a heightened awareness of those things around you, and bringing children back to nature, as simple as it sounds, is such an interesting challenge these days of modern acceleration and video, and everything is so high strung.
Well, there's so much input, and that's what I think kids are learning, and that is they're not learning how to simply be within themselves, but always having their attention drawn to some outside source. And the way that we learn how to be successful in this life is learn how to master our mind, so our mind isn't mastering us. And what I did with my kids when they were little, and by the way, Roxanne, my youngest son, Andre, who's 33, just got married 3 weeks ago.
Oh, great.
I'm going to tell a story on Andre now that's 25 years old.
Oh, great. Oh, wow.
But, I noticed he was having trouble focusing in school. There were complaints from the teacher that he wasn't paying attention. And I, as I sat with him and I said, well, what happens? Where do you go in your mind when you're in school? Well, his mind was going absolutely everywhere. It was outside. It was inside. It was to delight. It was to terror. It was to everything. And so I thought the easiest thing to do with him was simply to teach him how to focus on something portable that he always had with him, and that's your breathing. What we know from physiological studies is that babies breathe from their bellies. You can watch them in their cribs. Their little bellies go up and down like little bellows. And that actually relaxes the nervous system, and it brings about this relaxation response. And it also focuses the mind. If you get tense or anxious, you can notice this yourself. The breath gets shallow, it gets irregular, it gets ragged. That creates the fight or flight response. So the easiest way to shift your physiology from stress to focus is to shift your breathing. So I just taught Andre at night when I would put him to bed, I would say, okay, now here you are, watch your belly. And I would teach him just to count back from 5 to 1, as his belly would expand on the in-breath, and then he would say 5, and his belly would float down again, and then 4, it would expand, and on the out-breath, float down. And at the end of counting back just 2 or 3 times, he was so calm. And then I said, okay, so in school, when your mind starts to wander, all you have to do is focus on that belly breathing and bring you back to what's happening now. And without my even mentioning it, he started to use it before tests and spelling tests.
Fabulous.
And I still remember
that
one
is
day,
awesome.
it was so awesome. He came back and he said, Mom, I've made this great discovery. I said, well, what could that be? And he said, breathing is the secret of life.
Oh, gosh, he's great. I know he's still adorable, I'm sure. So tell me, did you discover in your investigations of cross-cultural people something common about breathing and focusing and praying, if you will, tuning into whatever they believed is sacred and divine?
Well, absolutely. And, your listeners may also be interested in a book that Herbert Benson wrote in the mid-1970s called The Relaxation Response. And that book is as current today as it was 30 years ago. It's fascinating. But he explored meditation in different religious traditions and cultures around the world, and he found out that the most common form of meditation was just focusing on the breath. But when it was used in a religious sense, often a word or phrase or prayer was coupled with the breath. So, for example, in the Christian tradition, you had the Desert Fathers and Mothers of the 2nd century, and they would use the Greek phrase, Kyrie eleison, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy upon me, a sinner would be the full translation of this, but maybe on the in-breath, Kyrie, and the out-breath, eleison.
Right.
where someone else may not be religiously interested at all, but could simply enjoy watching the breath. But in terms of looking at different traditions, everywhere from Zen Buddhism to Kabbalistic Judaism to Christianity, there are breath-centered meditations where sacred words and prayers have been used, as long as history allows us to go back.
Right.
And I find it interesting as a physiologist to say, when you see the same technique and the same instructions coming from different cultures at different times, there must be something that that links them all, that makes this rewarding for people to do. And I think from the spiritual point of view, that focus on breath and prayer is kind of like a doorway. It's a portal, and you knock on that door and you say, "Well, God, here I am. Want to spend time?" It's a way of opening a conversation, if you will, with something larger than yourself.
Right. Exactly. So, what is it that you would say the golden compass is?
Well, now this is interesting. Let me give a little bit of a background.
All right.
I'm the author of 12 different books, and any of your listeners who are interested can just go to my website where they're listed along with a number of meditation tapes, lecture tapes, audio tapes. But my website is my name. I love that these days.
Yes, good. Say it.
It's saying it's one thing, spelling it's another. But it's JoanBorysenko.com, and Borysenko is B as in boy, ORYSENKO, Borysenko.
Right,
and
.com. Right.
My books are all on mind-body medicine, spirituality, some of them on women's issues. But the current book actually comes out of a school that I started about a year ago with two colleagues. And it's a school that trains people in the art of spiritual direction. And spiritual direction, it sounds odd, like someone is going to direct your spiritual journey, but that's not what it's about. It's about sitting with someone who is really trained as a companion, who can listen to you as you talk about your life and see where in your life you feel like you're drawing closer to spirit and where it is that you feel like you're drawing away. And although the term spiritual tradition, direction originally came out of Christianity, there are spiritual direction kinds of, shall we say, threads or strands that run through just about every religious tradition. So, for example, within Buddhism, there's something called the Kalyana Mitta, or beautiful friend, who really helps you to focus your practice, your attitude, your discernment, so that you're becoming inside more and more free of the things that bother you, the leftovers from your childhood, your social conditioning, so you can be more authentically present in the moment.
It seems like it's a similar notion and message to the program that I wrote about From a Grain of Sand, I Can Make a Pearl, and in it, the idea is that children can be their own best friend. This beautiful friend can reside within, but you need to be quiet to access that friendship.
That's
silence.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Say a little bit more about that program, Roxanne. Is it on tape?
Yes, that's on CD, and I know in our next break, Cameron can cue up the excerpt from the web, which people can go to mindworksforchildren.com and hear an excerpt from it. But the true meaning of the program is about helping children discover that they can be more active in, I would say, adjusting their mood and being happy and content by truly quieting down and understanding that there is a place within them that is sacred and divine that cannot be disturbed. And it is like a pearl, beautiful pearl. And, of course, all of the parts are animated with beautiful children's voices, and the voice of the pearl is a 4-year-old who says on the CD, I am your friend, I am the pearl, in other words, come to me and I will be here. I'm always here for you. And it's a very sweet message, and the way that the children deliver some of the information is really easy for kids to understand and follow, because there's, of course, the music, which is very riveting and engaging, as well as the voice and the cheer and the attitudes of the children that are another, I would say, avenue for information to be disseminated. And so there are bands of activity that children are listening to simultaneously, which makes it very engaging and also easy for them to move into a trance-like state, because they are now following their breath and using the rhythm and the rhyme to just go sink down.
Roxanne, you're really a master of creating wonderful, wonderful products like this for children. And I just want your listeners to know that I have given away so many sets of your 4 CD sets, the Mind Works for Children set, and people just love them. Kids really relate to them, and it's such a wonderful thing to do for your child or any other child that you know.
Well, thank you, Joan. I take that very compliment to heart. And I know that, as I mentioned earlier in the program, that it was our conversations and much of the work that I did with those children who were terminally ill at Children's Hospital that started to get me to really integrate what you were teaching the adults in that clinic, at the Mind Body Clinic, and how could I do something that would be useful and meaningful for children, but have a little bit more of their imagination activated so that they could grab onto these ideas. And I just feel, we worked backstage, if you will, and I was very inspired by what you were teaching, the adults at the time and what I was learning. So it's such a nice opportunity to circle back and say, thank you for that. I can say thank you for the compliment, but right back at you.
Well, it's great. And kids, of course, live in a world of magic and mystery and imagination, and it's so easy to engage them. It's so easy for them to learn to not only change their physiology, but to find the parts of themselves that are anxious and talk to those parts so that they learn something from them, and access the parts of them like the pearl that are always present, always calm, always there for them. If only this were added to the curriculum of schools, Roxanne, we would have a much easier time as we grew up.
Absolutely. I know there are many people, including Rachel Kessler, Soul of Education author, who is working on this sort of thing, and so am I, of course, doing as much as I can to reach schools that are open. But it discourages me when I hear someone who's chair of a PTO say to me, some of the fathers in the group will say, our kids just have to toughen up. Stress is not going to go away. We can't make it so easy for them. We don't believe in stress management. And I'm just, at a loss for how to respond to that. What would you say to...
Call it success training. Because
Sorry?
It really is. Call it success training. Bringing out your full potential, because that's really what it is. And just, different ways of seeing the same thing. I think every person in their own good heart has some inkling of what it is to be fully human, and what we are needing to do in all of our different endeavors and all of our different aspects of what we bring to the world is just to find language that brings people together that everybody can relate to.
No, I agree, totally. We're going to take a break, a commercial break right now, and hopefully Cameron will be able to cue up that excerpt from A Grain of Sand, I Can Make a Pearl, and then we'll be back and would like to have you tell us a little bit more about this really fascinating new book called The Golden Compass.
Breathe deep, breathe long. Oh yes, breathing deep and breathing long is how you find the moment of magic, the magic of now. And now that you know purling begins with Y-O-U, now is the moment to try something new. Say to yourself, I can breathe myself happy. I can see myself happy.
Okay, so Joan, that was a little share from the CD From A Grain of Sand, I Can Make a Pearl.
It's wonderful. I thought I could listen to this myself.
It has a nice little lick to it, and I know that the conversation that we're having, and I want to follow through on it, really has to do with not only what it is that happens when our bodies are in stress and how important it is for us to learn ways to slow down and truly take a breath and decompress, but even more so when we were at the Mind Body Clinic and we taught people how to reframe stressful situations, which is a cognitive behavioral technique. I found myself trying to bring down to an elementary level this very sophisticated abstract idea that our thought is the thoughts that we hold in our mind can and do translate to the physiology, that the feeling happens so quickly, and if we could take a microphone and put it into our heads and listen to what we're saying to ourselves, we might be able to hear what is driving the feeling of anxiety up, or what is causing this profound sadness to continue. And so when I work with children, I share with them something that I believe it was Albert Ellis and his group designed, called the ABC model, where you look at a thought that's current and really hurting and disturbing you, and then you see what you can do to reframe it. And in the reframe, the feeling changes from anxiety to maybe some relief, or maybe from anxiety to a little more confidence, depending on what it is that I can help the children to see might be a better phrase or thought or word to hold on to. Well, just like an oyster takes an irritation and turns it into a pearl, this idea of going pearling was something that I shared with the children, where they could turn this pesky thought into a pearl, something more positive, something even neutral would be better than a negative thought, in order to raise their mood and bring their balance back. So we're talking about pearling as the metaphor on this CD for how they can now begin to watch their thoughts like watching a puppet show, and then see if they can imagine something that brings their happiness. It's a little bit like that song, Mary, not from Mary Poppins, but I think it was Sound of Music, where Julie Andrews talks about thinking about your favorite things can sometimes be the beginning of changing your mood and elevating yourself. These are the very simplistic ways that I've taken some of those more abstract and complex ideas that you've taught the adults and brought them down to the elementary level.
Well, it's great because we all need those reminders. All the abstract stuff is great. But when we're stuck in one of our thoughts, I think somewhere I read that the average adult thinks 84,000 negative thoughts a day. It's amazing we're still alive.
No kidding. 84,000?
Yeah.
Wow. There's no relief.
Yeah, it's a relief to know we're so normal, right?
Oh, my gosh. It's amazing we can breathe.
That's right. But
so living a spiritually guided life, I hope, would have some direction.
Now, Roxanne, I have to tell you that we're in the midst of writing that book, so that if your readers are looking for the Golden Compass, it will actually not be released until August of 2007. But we're in the midst right now of the fascinating interview process, which was very clever of us to figure out how to spend time with some of the most wonderful spiritual geniuses of our time.
Oh, tell us about who you're interviewing. Wow, that is a great opportunity.
It's fabulous. Right now, in the end, there'll be about 30 interviews, and we just have 2 or 3 left. It's been an exciting process.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah. So
have you had to travel for some of it?
No, actually, we're interviewing people by phone, which is wonderful, because technology is just grand these days, and that allows you to record the conference call as you're doing it, and then it can be transcribed later. So we actually are preferring to interview over the radio, although we have some wonderful spiritual teachers in Boulder, Colorado, where we live, and the we is my husband, Gordon DeVaron, and myself. We're co-writing this book. So we've interviewed some of the local teachers here. But we have interviewed Christians, Episcopals, Catholics, in terms of the Christian denominations, and a number of rabbis and Sufis and Buddhists and Hindus and some Native Americans, a woman, wonderful, from a Peruvian shamanic heritage.
Oh, awesome.
And so we're really having a wonderful time.
That's a fascinating tradition as well. Very different from our Western, world, but very moving and inspiring
and very earth-based. It's so easy to forget that the earth, really it's not that the earth is metaphorically our mother. It's that without the earth we don't live. It's the source of all nurture. And in Western culture we've gotten so far beyond that.
I know,
We're
it's
so
true.
divorced from it in general, certainly not everyone. There are many people who are very close to it. But we've asked a series of 12 questions from these 30-odd teachers. And the first question is, what is spiritual guidance? And, of course, the answers, as you can imagine, are quite diverse. And I think the understanding of it that I have gained is that spiritual guidance is always there, that it comes both from within and it comes from synchronous events when other people kind of share what's going on with them, and we realize, it's going on with me too. And that we're all interdependent. So whether we get the guidance from dreams, from synchronicities, from prayer, these are all ways that we open a doorway into our relationship with the divine, whatever our own definition of the divine may be. Some force larger than ourselves, which is also within ourselves. That's the sense we've had really from all of the different teachers, from all of the different traditions.
It occurs to me that when listening to your perspective, I recount how many children are sharing with me the emphasis of their world is on me and my,
Yes.
rather than this more, as you said, inextricably entwined web of life, this broader perspective where we are interdependent and we really are in a very different time in this 21st century where teaching children how it is that we do impact each other in a very global way, as you mentioned, but more so in the spiritual, can help lead them to maybe taking more responsibility, or maybe we could call it just being more curious about their own spiritual life, and having them learn some of the answers to these 12 questions could be, I would say, an eye-opener for young people to begin to really act more in right action.
Well, I do think that just the posing of the questions themselves to the kids would be interesting. It's never so much interesting to hear other people's answers as it is to address the questions yourself, in, either within yourself or in dialogue with others. So that's why it's so fascinating to ask people a basic question like, what is spiritual growth? And I think the answer that tends to come out from just about everyone is that it's a gradual decrease in thinking about me and mine, and an increase in thinking about us and ours. That you could say it's a gradual decrease in narcissism is another good definition of what is civilization, because as the emphasis on me and mine decreases a bit, so that you see, it's not that you have to give up what's important to you, but that in hoping and in being active in there being less poverty, less hunger, less abuse, less difficulty, everybody does well. You feel better about yourself. It's just like the health research on altruism. And that is when you do things for the good of others, you feel a lot better yourself. That love is not an independent phenomena about your getting your own needs met, but it's an interdependent phenomena where everybody becomes more capable, more joyful, more needs being fulfilled. And we've had a good week, I think, in that domain when we think of Warren Buffett's large fortune now going to the Gates Foundation. It's remarkable to think that, for example, a person who might have died in Africa for lack of a 50-cent shot of antibiotics can live. It's these small things. But in terms of teaching our kids, even just a few years ago, we had the term global village, but it wasn't quite real to people yet. Now, with the increase in media and Internet, which of course has its good side and its bad side, like all things, the good side for kids is that they see these kids in Africa. They see somebody who can be saved by a 50 cent donation that will buy them, a shot of penicillin. Remember when we were kids, we would have drives where you brought in tubes of toothpaste and things to send to third world countries.
That's right.
But we had no idea what is a third world country. We had a very small sense that now it's very, very different. And I think that this is a good way to foster compassion within children.
Totally. And what are some of those other questions that you would ask? And what were some of those 12 questions?
Well, see, these are questions you'll have to figure out how to make them adaptable to kids.
Right. That's my job.
They were questions, for example, one of my favorite was a question about doubt. Is doubt a help, a hindrance, or both? And of course the question is, what kind of doubt? That doubt generally, if you're doubting your way, if you inquire a little bit more deeply into the doubt, what's behind that? Is it a fear of something that you should be looking out for? In other words, is doubt your good friend saying, hey, you're going down the wrong path? Or is this a pattern of yours that recurs, that paralyzes your ability for action? Or are you talking about doubt as a basic lack of trust and faith in a loving universe? So these are all kind of fascinating things to look at. But
do you remember the book Fire in the Soul? It's one of my favorites of yours, The New Psychology of Spiritual Optimism. Chapter 8 was the night vision, you called it, courage, hope, and optimism. And in it, you give a little quote by Emmanuel, which goes, There are no guarantees. From the viewpoint of fear, none are strong enough. From the viewpoint of love, none are necessary.
That's one of my favorite quotes of all time.
And in it, you talk about the cowardly lion from The Wizard of Oz, and how it's so perfect for kids, and how the cowardly lion wanted courage. And Oz, the great Oz, said, "You have plenty of courage, I'm sure. All you need is confidence in yourself. There is no living thing that is not afraid when it faces danger. But true courage is in facing danger when you are afraid. And that kind of courage you have plenty of. It's within you." And so he used the placebo effect to cure him by setting out a bowl of green liquid. And the lion asked, "What is it?" And the great Oz said, "Well, if it were inside of you, it would be courage. You know, of course, that courage is always inside one. So this is really something that cannot be called courage until you've swallowed it. Therefore, I advise you to drink it as soon as possible." And he tricked the lion into having an awareness of his own inner state of courage, which would dissipate doubt if we could access that spiritual optimism and bring night vision to our days of doubt or times of doubt, and really be anchored in this beautiful golden compass, as you call it. I love the title of the book.
And that's really what the golden compass is about, is to find that place inside yourself that has the trust, that has the faith, so that you can look and see what in this situation brings forth my best, and how can I do this? So I think it's important for people to realize that too, that spiritual guidance is not about getting everything you want, because most of the time we don't need everything we want anyhow.
That's a good point, because I was about to see if we could conclude with a little bit of a seed thought that we could send folks out with, especially those who are perhaps more challenged by depression or doubt and fear. And what would you put forth as a seed thought for our listeners to take with them, if that's their current state of mind?
That every state of mind is something that you can learn from, and that our biggest mistake in this culture is trying to just chase away negative states of mind. If instead we inquire into them and say, well, here I am, and right now I'm afraid. And if we can sit with it and ask the wisest part of ourselves, what is this fear about? What is there to learn? How am I to go? Then it too becomes a source of spiritual guidance. And I think truly what spirituality is finding that part of yourself which is always growing toward the light, which means toward a greater understanding of compassion toward yourself, toward the earth, toward all living things, and being able to bring that into action, make this world a better place.
Beautiful. And I know our friend John Kabat-Zinn had recently given a talk at the Omega Institute about being fearless. That was the title of the program, and he said this is similarly to what you're asking us to do, is just to cultivate an awareness and wholesome states of mind, that there is something to learn from every part of our lives and every emotion that comes, but it's sometimes more challenging, and that's where I think people get tripped up. And I can say for myself, I get challenged when I'm stricken with a little more doubt than I'd like to admit. But you know, it does seep in, even with the best efforts and all of the skills that I have. I still find that there are passages that we must go through, dark nights of the soul, so to speak, and they do challenge us. But when we go through that Phoenix process, we come out truly with a gift and a new way of seeing, new way of being.
Absolutely. Well, Roxanne, let me tell you, I'm proud of you, and I'm so glad to see that you have this program and just such a great fan of yours in terms of all the work that you do with children, because they're really our future.
They are. Thank you, Joan. Thank you so much for spending time with us, and I send you blessings and my best to Andre and all.
Thank you very much.